welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria, the continent, and all around the world. Here's what is coming up in the next 60 minutes or less. Bus crash in South Africa kills at least 45 people. Plus, on the program, US President Joe Biden outlines plans to tax American billionaires to help fund support for Ukraine. The World Today starts right now. And wherever you're watching from around the world, we are live from our studios here in Lagos, Nigeria. I am Kelly Egiga. Today is Good Friday, and Christians all over the world are marking the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and his death at Calvary. It is a solemn day of reflection for believers who recognize the sacrifice made for the redemption of humankind. In countries around the world, churches are holding special services, including processions, prayers, and readings of the Passion narrative to honor the event leading up to the crucifixion. In Nigeria, Good Friday is marked with reverence and solemnity by the Christian community, which constitutes a significant proportion of the population. Some churches participate in the Stations of the Cross procession, retracing Jesus' final hours through prayers and meditations. The day is also observed through fasting and abstinence as believers reflect on the ultimate sacrifice made for their salvation. But beyond its religious significance, Good Friday in Nigeria serves as a time for family gatherings and community outreach. It is also a day for acts of charity and compassion, with many churches and organizations putting together initiatives to support the less privileged in the society. But in South Africa, it was a tragic Good Friday as 45 people died after a vehicle lost control and went off a bridge. An 8-year-old girl is the only survivor of the crash. The bus plunged about 50 meters off a bridge on a mountain pass into a ravine, catching fire as it hit the ground in the northeastern Limpopo province. The passengers were pilgrims traveling from Gaborone, the Botswana capital, to an Easter service in the town of Moria. Authorities in the region say 34 body bags have been taken from the scene, but only 9 bodies are identifiable. As a transport minister, Sindisiwe Shikunga, who was at the scene of the incident, revealed that the South African government would help repatriate the bodies and hold a full inquiry into the cause of the crash. Let's bring you up to speed with updates on the Baltimore bridge collapse, where the Joe Biden administration has approved $60 million in emergency fund following Maryland's request. Although a massive effort to clean up the debris is underway, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, says there is a long road ahead to clear up wreckage, remove the ship, extract the bridge pieces, and rebuild it. 8 construction workers were on the bridge when it partially collapsed, and 2 of them have been rescued from the river. Experts say structural failures are to blame for the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Baird had an interview with the Department of Transportation Federal High Administrator Charlene Bard.
Administrator Shaylin Batts, we know this is a very tough time for America and obviously the Maryland region. This was a tragic incident that occurred just a few days ago. Tell us exactly where are we now, the current status. We know that there were 2 individuals rescued, 2 that were presumed dead, and 4 others that are presumably not alive either, that are still under search for at this time.
Yeah, and thank you. And it is it's a very traumatic time. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family members who have lost loved ones. I think, there are 2 people who have been identified as lost and 4 who are presumably lost, and there is work to recover their remains. And obviously that is a priority right now, and just waiting for those efforts to cease and the investigation to be completed, and then we'll begin to transition to rebuilding efforts.
So we know investigation is going to take some time. We also know that the amount of goods that were on this ship were quite vast. What is the cleanup effort? What is the timetable on the investigation and kind of to getting the port back open?
Yeah, look, I think safety is always going to be our number one priority. So that is actually what is being carefully worked out right now while the recovery efforts are going on with Army Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, Maryland DOT, and others around how do you safely remove the ship? How do you safely begin to deal with the debris of the wreckage? And then in terms of timeline, I would say that's everybody's critical mission right now is to get the port reopened, get that navigable waterway restored so that the thousands of people whose jobs are being impacted by this closure can get back to work. This is an important artery for the entire national economy. And then, particularly within our work stream, is getting that bridge rebuilt. And so I would say it's days and weeks on the clearing of wreckage and getting the port back open, and it's months to over a year in terms of getting a bridge rebuilt. But we're very early days right now.
Yes, and you mentioned thousands of jobs and individuals that just can't get to work. What is being done to ensure the livelihood of those individuals is being secured? Is there any federal funding to assist those individuals? And obviously, that means that there's a backup for entry into the Baltimore port. Are those ships being redirected to other ports across the United States?
Yeah, so President Biden has talked about this being a whole of government approach. And so, the Army Corps is working on the clearance, the Coast Guard is working with the active shipping, Department of Labor is working, and we have actually twice daily interagency calls right now, but Department of Labor is looking at what resources can be brought to bear for the affected workers. And then our Department of Transportation has been working with the shippers, automobile shippers, heavy farm equipment. Sugar is another important commodity here, and just making sure that inbound goods have a place to go and try to give a timeline to folks around when they can assume restoration of operations here.
Thank you so much. And lastly, Administrator, as we look at the Biden infrastructure bill, we know infrastructure has been a huge focus for the Biden administration. Is this anything dealing with, people have talked about cyber attacks, or is this dealing with the failing infrastructure that exists? Or even if this bridge was, top notch and had not been built many years ago, would it still come down at the rate that it did with the ship hitting it?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot of questions around this, and this is why we will have the NTSB investigation that will drive us. But I mean, look, this is a 50-year-old bridge that was in satisfactory or fair condition. So I'm almost 50 years old, and I think I would probably get a similar bill of health if I was being compared. And so I think this is not a failure of infrastructure where we had an old bridge that came down. This is a bridge that was built in the 1970s when cargo ships were carrying 2,500 containers, and now they're carrying 25,000 containers. It's a massive impact. So that's what the investigation will tell us. What was the sequence of events that led to this, and how can we either retrofit existing bridges or build new ones to better handle these massive new containers that are coming through? And we do this around every major incident or tragedy that comes. We want to make sure that we learn and deploy those lessons as quickly as possible.
Well, Administrator, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best, and we thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right, so there you go. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Baird having that exclusive conversation with the Department of Transportation Federal High Administrator, Charlene Bard. And now to other stories. Do you intend to join the British Army and have worries about your birds? Then worry no more, as the country has lifted a ban allowing soldiers and officers to grow birds while in service. But the birds and mustache must be neat and properly groomed, as it will be routinely checked. The policy comes into immediate effect as the Army becomes the last of the armed forces to allow its officers grow birds. The new directive follows years of discussion around the Army's policy on facial hair. According to the Army, there may be specific occasions where the personnel are required to be clean-shaven. Officers and soldiers will be directed to shave as and when circumstances dictate. It is thought that the army leaders hope the new policy will help attract new recruits. And to the gang violence in Haiti, where the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, says the chaos has brought the country close to collapse. Mr. Turk is also calling for urgent intervention to protect the people and the swift deployment of a multinational security support mission to the Caribbean nation.
The situation in Haiti is cataclysmic. Corruption, impunity, and poor governance, compounded by increasing levels of gang violence, have eroded the rule of law and brought state institutions close to collapse. Tackling insecurity must be a top priority to protect the population and to prevent further human suffering. Gangs continued to use sexual violence to brutalize, punish, and control people. Some women are forced into exploitative sexual relations with gang members. In addition, the rape of kidnapped hostages continues to be used to coerce families into paying ransoms. Children continue to be recruited and abused. All these practices are outrageous and must stop at once. It is shocking that despite the horrific situation on the ground, arms keep still pouring in. I appeal for a more effective implementation of the arms embargo. I reiterate the need for an urgent deployment of a multinational security support mission to help the national police to stop violence. I also want to stress that enhancing security alone will not be conducive to long-lasting solutions, and I call for concurrent policies aiming at the restoration of the rule of law. Accountability is paramount if we aim to restore public trust in the rule of law and the state institutions.
And speaking of the deployment of a multinational security support mission to Haiti, officials say any more delay may wipe out the Haitian National Police. The capital, Port-au-Prince, has been under constant bombardments by gang leaders. Residents have fled their homes and taken refuge in government buildings. The clash is also taking its toll on hospitals as 18 attacks have been reported.
If this takes much longer, there may not be much of an HNP, Haitian National Police, to support. So it is more than urgent that the force get in there in some way, shape, or form as soon as possible. Port-au-Prince and the surrounding area is essentially an open-air prison. There's no way out, air, land, or sea, and in fact, it's not even so open air anymore because people are often afraid to leave their houses. Literally leaving their house to go to a market, if it's open, is a life and threatening adventure for them. What's happened recently is attacks specifically on hospitals. Over 18 have been documented. I think barely half the hospitals in Port-au-Prince now function, and if the ones that are functioning barely, you have attacks on schools. I mentioned earlier, a school was set on fire 3 days ago. I just learned this morning the École Normale, which is one of the elite academic institutions in Haiti, was set on fire last night. You have an attack on the central bank offices. You had 2 attempts to take the National Palace. You have human rights defenders and journalists being targeted. So this is extremely alarming. The gangs have turned their violence towards people that for whatever reasons they see as a threat to their continued control. The gangs use sexual violence to terrorize, to intimidate, to control. And it's a power, and it's just horrendous, and there's very, very limited services for the survivors and victims of these attacks. Port-au-Prince, everything so much in Haiti, it's so centralized. Things come in, things come out, the commodities, and you have the gangs controlling the port, the main maritime port. Hundreds and hundreds of containers are now there, either looted or can't get out, and to the airport. The airport's been closed, it'll be 4 weeks soon. So for anything to move, usually would come into Port-au-Prince, then go out to the countryside, it can't.
And back here in the continent, former President Jacob Zuma has been barred from running in South Africa's general election in May by the country's Electoral Commission. Although the commission has not given any reason for the ban, Mr. Zuma's 2021 conviction and jailing for contempt of court would appear to disqualify him. His backing of the new Umkhonto we Sizwe MK party has been seen as a possible threat to the governing African National Congress, which has suspended Mr. Zuma. The ANC had wanted South Africa's electoral body to deregister MK, but that request was rejected. The 81-year-old served as president from 2009 until 2018, when he had to step down because of corruption allegations. The U.S. is calling on the Sudanese armed forces to reopen all border crossings with Chad for humanitarian purposes, including the Andre border crossing. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, and U.S. Special Envoy for Sudan, Tom Pirello, revealed this while addressing reporters at the UN headquarters. Mr. Pirello says as Sudan heads into the rainy season, conditions could get even worse.
Call for the staff to immediately and fully reopen all of its. A few weeks ago, the Council came together to adopt a resolution calling for a Ramadan ceasefire. That resolution has thus far been ignored. Nearly a year since this crisis began, the situation in Sudan remains catastrophic, and it is only getting worse. And so we once again call for the SAF to immediately and fully reopen all of its border crossings with Chad for humanitarian purposes, including the Adre border crossing. Should they not, the Security Council must take swift action to ensure life-saving aid is delivered and distributed, including, if necessary, through a cross-border mechanism. People are starving, and it is really important that we not forget them. They need as much attention as we're paying to crises everywhere else in the world.
And as we head into into the rainy season, where conditions could get even worse, now is not the time to pause. Now is not the time to escalate. It is the time for us to bring together those actors who can help pave that path to peace, to humanitarian protection and access.
Welcome back to the program, everyone. An initiative dedicated to empowering female entrepreneurs is providing them with the tailored support needed to thrive in their respective industries. The AFROP's RevUp Women Initiative, the spotlight is on women-led startups as they share their stories to inspire each other.
The investor is moving with the money.
It's a vibrant gathering of female visionaries, entrepreneurs and change makers all coming together for the AFROP's RevUp Women Initiative Business Showcase, a program dedicated to propelling women-led startups and SMEs to new heights.
Actually giving us the welcome address.
But they're not just celebrating businesses, they are also celebrating the incredible women behind them.
We're looking at the report on investment in 2022, and we're very excited. Oh my God, $4 billion, that was invested into African startups. Well, let's look at the women numbers. And they were like 3% only, of that number that was women, like the investment that was given to women. That is a challenge. We are women, we're in the ecosystem. And the interesting thing is that, when I go to meetings, we're in the tech space, right? Almost 80% of my meetings are filled with women. Women are actively working, setting up these programs, but the women businesses are suffering. So we thought of setting up a program that does two things, right? One is to build the capacity of women to be able to set up their businesses, their structure to function as a woman, but most importantly, unlock financing for women.
You're very, very, very welcome. The women also receive a dose of motivation from a leading entrepreneur who highlights the importance of investing in women.
Despite the incredible potential and talents that women possess, we're still facing significant challenges in accessing resources and opportunities, some of which are limited access to capital, technology, and business support, as well as gender discrimination and lack of support networks. Our inability to take full advantage of networking opportunities due to perceived cultural biases and restrictions is another factor that greatly hinders our success. Yet, in spite of this, female-led startups in Africa are not only as profitable, if not more, than male-led startups, but also drive women's empowerment and positive social impact on the continent. So closing the gender gap and empowering women-owned businesses will play a pivotal role in shaping a more vibrant and equitable society in Africa and across the globe.
From a riveting panel discussion titled Trailblazing Women, Navigating Challenges and Triumphs, inspiring stories are shared, stirring the women in the room.
Inclusion looks to me like a coming together, where when we really want accelerated progress, we have to be builders, and not just builders on that scale of nano and small micro businesses, but builders on the scale of bigger institutions and bigger corporates, so that we can really influence and drive change. And that, of course, looks like a coming together where we bring the skill sets of generations, the skill sets of the different life cycles of our businesses, and of course the ideas and variants of industry to come together and really build sustainable businesses.
When you ask me what economic inclusion and empowerment looks like for women, it will be doing this with 10,000 women. It will be teaching them to start a business. It will be teaching them to make that business make money. It will be teaching them to put in the structures so that it will make money for them in the long term. It will be teaching them that when you've made the initial money, you invest it in something that continues to make more money for you.
And so we have to be very intentional about shouting about women's successes, women's failing forward. I don't think failure is the end of things. I think failure actually sets you up for the success and the bigger successes that we can get. So we need to shout about, I keep saying you could find somebody in this room who has the cure for cancer, but if they don't shout about it, then cancer remains uncured, right? So we need to really shout about the successes that we have so that another person who didn't think that their story could lead to a success can see themselves in you.
As the spotlight shines bright on these entrepreneurs, the aim is to let their achievements serve as a beacon of hope for future generations of women entrepreneurs.
It's the holy month of Ramadan, and thousands of Ethiopian Muslims have gathered for an evening iftar in the capital, Addis Ababa. The event was organized by Ethiopia's highest council for Islamic affairs. Participants gathered and can be seen breaking their fast, while volunteers also helped distribute meals and set up the table. The event is being held to promote unity, peace, and solidarity. The month of Ramadan, esteemed in the Islamic faith, is a period of reverence and devotion, and is the 9th month in the Islamic calendar. The annual observance entails devout prayers during the late evening and voluntary abstinence from both food and drinks throughout the daylight hours. And finally, on the program, a teacher from Dallas, formerly known as Dustin Abe, has decided to give himself a new identity. What's this new name, you may want to ask? Well, he has decided to go by the name literally anybody else. Funny, isn't it? The 35-year-old maths teacher is on a mission to launch a presidential bid to take on U.S. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. He's also out to convince locals to sign a petition which would allow him get on the ballot in Texas. He notes his decision to change his legal name wasn't about getting attention for the name itself, but the message behind it. According to local media reports, literally anybody else needs at least 113,000 signatures from non-primary voters in Texas by May. And while he won't be on the ballot in any other states, the candidate hopes his campaign will give a voice to anyone feeling unrepresented and uninspired by a 2020 presidential rematch in the U.S. elections.
I'm telling you, my legal name. I saw the state of the current political climate, and I didn't see anybody who represented, what I wanted. And even beyond that, I saw things that I personally, was against. I mean, we have such division in this country right now. I looked at this and I said, can we do something better? Can we have, literally anybody else? Having the idea of getting literally anybody else as a president, I think, a lot of people see themselves in that sentiment, and which is why I think it's caught on so much. The first part of the changing the name process was talking to the wife. It's definitely one of those things you need to make sure that your home, is of one mind when going into it. And, there's obviously a lot of hesitations, with doing something so personal. Your name is your identity, it's what you stand for. The name my mom gave me, Dustin, it means valiant fighter. And so I guess in a way, what I'm doing now is consistent with my original name, but nobody would have voted. Nobody would have gotten the name Dustin Eby wouldn't have gotten the attention of, anyone. I'm the unknown. When I would first tell people about my name change, I was the crazy guy, but it wasn't, for me, it wasn't about, trying to curve attention. I mean, I guess in a sense it is, but it's attention to the message. That's what's important.
All right, so last name else and his first name, literally anybody. And we wish him all the best in his presidential campaign. That does it for us here on The World Today, for today and indeed the week. On behalf of the team, I'm Kelly Egiga. Bye now.